So I read your blog today, and the concept of self-love was what you were talking about. And that's a big one for me, because I never even realized what it was, or it's something that as a kid, or when you're younger, it's not something that you really grab onto. And it almost seems like a concept that we grab onto, at least for me, like once you've been hurt, or once something has kind of maybe gone what you would see as off track. And that's what caused me to kind of come back and take inventory on where, and I don't really use the term go wrong anymore, because I feel like things come to us and teach us, but I started to focus on the concept of self-love when I realized that I didn't really have it.
Right.
So I don't know if that's something you see in a lot of people that come to you.
I mean, I think in the context of healing, definitely. Part of why people end up in situations that they're not happy in is because they're not treating themselves like they have value.
Yeah.
And for me, self-love is expressed in the little boundaries that we set every day, either with ourselves or other people. It's not like going to the spa or those kinds of more taking care of the external, but how we care for ourselves, what we allow others to do in the way of how they treat us, and what we do in treating ourselves. That makes sense?
That does make sense. And I know, I've always been kind of a mind, body, and spirit. And when I asked you to maybe write a few things down about energy healing and what you do every day, you conceptualize those things as all one thing. And right. I feel like everywhere else, I try to focus on those things in my life, right. But I really liked that concept of that it is really all one.
Yeah, it is.
And I felt that working with you in a way that I haven't felt. It's definitely like I go to yoga. My day already, I've been in the pool doing aqua PT. I've been to yoga. I've done another interview about volleyball, so it's another physical,
Right.
And now I'm talking to you, and I love, the way my life, I weave in all of these things, but the concept that, because all of that's physical, all these physical things, they feed me.
Right, and if you think about it, you're engaging all those parts of you in every single one of those activities. There's a place where your emotions are engaged, where you're having to think about how to do what you're doing and doing it, sometimes more consciously, sometimes less.
Right.
And there's a definite energetic, spiritual dynamic in there as well.
Right.
And obviously, anything you're experiencing happens in your body.
Right.
Whether it's a spiritual experience, a love experience, whatever it is, it's also physical.
And that concept of your nervous system and how it reacts with the world based on the way that you've been treated.
Right.
Having a son who's on the autism spectrum and learning about that fight or flight and that heightened awareness, that heightened nervous system, I learned about that kind of taking him in and watching how he sees the world and trying to figure out how to make it accessible for him. But then it made me, as things do, realize things about yourself.
Right.
And how do you work with the nervous system? Like when patients come into you, or I don't even want to call them patients, clients,
I call them clients. A lot of what I do is help people become aware of where they are in their nervous system. So whether they're in an activated fight or flight state or in a more relaxed parasympathetic state. And I help essentially retrain the nervous system. When we're used to being in fight or flight a lot, it's our go-to. A lot of times it's our constant, it's not even our go-to. A lot of people live there and they don't know that's where they're living.
Amen. Yeah.
So when we kind of like tune into our body and what relaxation feels like, and part of what I do is help people go into that state of relaxation through body work and energy work. And the more you track that state, the more familiar you get with that state, the easier it is to go to it. Also, as you do that, it changes your neurology. So your body learns how to be relaxed and how to recognize the difference between the conversation that creates a lot of activation and fear and the one that kind of calms and soothes. And learning that gives us the opportunity in life to make decisions that take us in one direction or the other, which ultimately affect our quality of life and our decision making. Because when you are in constant fight or flight, you can't think.
Right.
You can't analyze. You don't have access to that part of your brain, spirit, body.
Right.
So one of the reasons why I think working with the nervous system is primary is because of that. Like, if you are in fight or flight, you are focused on surviving.
Right.
And that's
It
always...
takes away a whole host of choices, right?
Right, because it's going to override anything else.
Yeah.
Survival is always going to override creating, success, love, because if you don't survive, you can't have any of it.
Right.
Right. So it's just basic.
And that concept, like, what I've learned is I'm super hard on myself, and I've always felt like, oh, we always have a choice. We always, we create our lives. We have a choice. I make my choices, and then I create this life that I so deserve. Or like, if I make all of these right choices, then I'm gonna get this. Right. And the thing that's really made me step back and go, if you're in that learning about fight or flight, like it's not necessarily all about those choices. Even though I'm very much I'm such a proponent of, finding your destiny and creating, just manifesting. But you can't when you're in that.
You don't
fight.
have.
You
Yeah,
don't
you
have
don't
that
have
ability.
you don't have as many choices.
Right.
And even those of us who are in fight or flight, the majority of time, we have spaces where we have to let down, at least to some extent, right? Like when it's time to sleep, it's time to, like when you're relaxing and watching movies. So there's still these windows of being able to make decisions that take you in one direction or another.
Right.
But they're shorter.
Right. And I now knowing where, in times that I've lived in that state, you covet those times.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So your sleep is like something that you do not want messed with, right? Or you, like this 1 hour of the day, like if I need my morning time, like I better get it. Or you feel like...
It's crazy.
Yeah, like you're just balancing, balancing the plates. And whereas the more you get out of that fight or flight and into that parasympathetic state, there's just so much more flow.
Yeah, things are a lot easier.
Right.
And become way more efficient.
Yeah.
And when you do choose things to help you, they help you more. You go further with them.
Yeah. So how long have you been?
About 20, 25 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All in the South Bay?
No, I was in Venice, Santa Monica for probably 10.
Okay. And then how long have you been in Redondo?
About 10.
Okay.
A little over 10.
And do you feel like the energy healing was something you were born with? Or you've learned?
Both.
Okay.
I would say both. I definitely was born with some talent or ability, which for the first 20 of my years of my life was totally crazy making.
Right.
Because I didn't know.
You don't know what to do with it?
I didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
I didn't have a point of reference.
Yeah.
And then I had a friend who was doing a training, and she did a session on me because you have to practice.
Okay.
And in that session was sort of my aha moment of like, oh, I am feeling all of this. She's like standing across the room with her hands up and describing what she felt in my energy field, and I was feeling her touch my energy field from like 5 feet away. So my curiosity led me into the training, and I just kind of kept going.
Okay.
Mainly because it was, at that time, it helped me cope with my experience of life.
And do you feel like your experience of life, you have certain experiences because you're so open to taking in? When, I keep saying like I'm seeking healers at this point, and they do keep coming in front of, they just keep crossing my path because I feel like I'm open to it, I'm looking for it. But it also, I feel like I'm recognizing that I have that same, but I never knew what it was.
Right.
But you feel like you can feel from someone across the room, like you feel pain in them.
Absolutely.
Or you feel, even if it can be,
joy.
Good joy and good things. But for me, it's so hard to, when you don't know that not everybody, or maybe that you're more in tune, it, to find those boundaries, to like know what to do with that feeling,
Yeah.
that's a really hard thing.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things I teach. Like
Okay.
a lot of, I used to do it in groups and now it's more one-on-one. But I tend to attract people who have that kind of gift, and they're sort of in between the space of knowing it and being able to use it and being really disturbed by it because they
Yeah.
can't control it.
Uh-huh.
And they don't know what it is half the time, what's going on with them. And there are ways to learn how to deal with that. Like, it's a skill.
Interesting.
It's not something that, yes, it can be something that's happening to you, but it's also something you're doing.
Okay. And is that like a training? Like,
Yeah.
like, so once if you realize that you have that inclination, that feeling, or that you're taking in other people's energy, then you need to learn
get some training.
Yeah.
You need to know. I mean, I think that there's a lot of talk and thought about empathy, and
Right.
empathy can be a lot of things.
Okay.
And I would say that psychic empathy is really different
Okay.
than empathizing with people. Like,
Uh-huh.
for me, the experience of that is I literally feel what the other person feels. Like, if their knee hurts, my knee hurts.
Yeah.
If their hip is off, my hip joint will move
Right.
and be out of place.
Right. And I worked with you yesterday,
Mhm.
and then I told you about my water PT this morning, and
Mhm.
the first thing you mentioned was my hip.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And I woke up this morning with this crazy pain, and I've been trying to do my own self exercises, and
Yeah.
but I felt better after I left you yesterday.
I'm so glad.
So,
Yeah.
how, and there's the whole hard science world of, physical therapy, and I'm one at this point, I'll try anything, partly because I love to be active, and my
Mhm.
body's getting old, and I have, old injuries. So I've gone like the Western route, and I'll do PT and I'll do my exercises, and it doesn't always help. So there has been this I've kind of looked into the
Right.
Eastern type of more mystical,
Mhm.
energy healing type of
Stuff.
regimen, just to try to help me. I've always felt like there's another side to this, and it works the same way with my son. Western medicine, Eastern medicine, or there's just another side. It's just there's a mystical side of life that I feel, that I know he feels,
Mhm.
and so I'm drawn to it, and it's counter to. I don't want it to be counter to the way I was raised, because I'm very spiritual, but
How is it counter?
I wonder if you can speak to that idea that, for me, there's a big difference between religion and faith, and I'm very open to, like, I was raised Christian, but I was never, this was never something that was encouraged in my, like, I didn't know what to do with that feeling, because it was almost like it was
Not okay.
not okay.
Not allowed.
Right.
Or only certain people could have it.
Right.
If other people had it, they were bad.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, but to me, the idea of God, like, I believe in God, and I'm a Christian, but I was born in an area of the world where this is what I've been exposed to, and I'm, it's the faith that
Grateful.
yeah, I'm very grateful for my faith. It's this, like, the backbone of my strength. But to me, I see this, if God gives us this, he puts people in our lives, he's created all this energy. And then, but I wonder if you can speak more to what's your take on the energies of the world and the, like,
Division.
The division, yeah. Why do we see it black and white? Or maybe that was just my upbringing, but
I mean, I think that's there for a lot of people in a lot of ways. I don't think it has to be separate.
yeah,
Some of it really has to.
certainly not for me.
It comes down to politics and power and control. There's a good
Yeah.
bit of that's part of how religion does what religion does, or
Yeah,
the purpose of it
yeah,
is to guide people and contain them. And historically, there's been a lot of hierarchy in that
Mhm.
process. So if that context allows the belief that everyone has their own connection to the divine, and the sacred can move not just through them as individuals, but moves through life, then that power structure is challenged a little bit. And that creates some difficulty.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's new in any way that people have that connection, and it moves through them. For me, the faith or the sacred is in everything.
Yeah.
There's no separation.
See, and I feel
Right.
that. Like I can be standing on the beach or I can be standing in a church and there's
Yeah, and I would say most of the historical spiritual teachers, including Christ, that's what they taught.
Right.
And that's what they were about. And somewhere along the way in history that gets a little disconnected from,
Right.
and there's this push-pull.
And it seems like it's the human aspect of religion rather than the deity and the faith and the...
Yeah, there's a place where there are certain rules or laws that we create to make everyone live together better.
Yeah.
And religion offers that. So
For
does
sure.
the government, right?
Yeah.
And we need those things. Those are
Right.
good things.
Yeah.
It's difficult when the sacred gets disconnected.
Right. And
Or
then
where there are rules and laws that say, you can't do that or feel that because you're not in this
Right.
role.
And that can
or
happen on
order.
a macro level or a micro
Right.
level, and we get
And
either
it
way
does.
we disconnect, right?
Right.
We disconnect from who we are.
Yeah, and for me, that's where real illness is.
Yeah.
It's a disconnection from source or the sacred or God, whatever you want to call it. It's a place where we lose that presence within ourselves and access to it for ourselves.
Right.
And I'd say that's the bottom line of the work that I do for me, is to help people find that within themselves and for themselves.
So most people that come to you kind of know why they're coming?
Usually they have a reason.
Okay.
And I always start by asking them,
Sure.
why are you here? So if they haven't thought about it in the first probably 10 minutes of the session, they're feeling into that.
Interesting. And if, have you ever had someone come like less than willing, or?
Not really.
Because it seems to me like you
Yeah.
almost have to be open.
Yeah,
to it,
you
right?
have to choose to come.
Yeah. And there's an idea, for me, I guess I would say like self-help has been, the concept of self-help and self-love, and at first when I started into this it felt very self-indulgent. I had people that were, that's your thing, or, how do you, but the truth is, like, that's that shame you spoke about, and I don't know if you've read any of Brene Brown's, she talks about shame and, how it absolutely is, it's pulls us away from our truest destiny, right?
Yeah.
We're too afraid to live the way that we want to live, and that's been, you disconnect from who you really are, and that's like part of the process that I've gone through with you, and I've only been to see you a few times, but the accuracy with which you hit me with, it's okay to have fun, it's okay to be seen, like the things that you said to me, they hit to the core of exactly what it is that has held me back and where I am and why I feel that shame on certain levels, and it's really deep in there. Like I didn't even know that stuff was there. And what's that like to, your experience to be able to connect to people like that, and then
What's that like for me?
What's that like for you?
It's an interesting question.
It's a lot to take in.
I have to say that I don't know what else it would be like, right? So this is the only way I've ever been,
Right.
right? I mean, earlier in my life it was very strange because I didn't know that it was different, right? So
Right.
I would sit in a coffee shop, when there used to be coffee shops with couches in them, and you'd end up sitting with a stranger.
Sure.
And all of a sudden this person's like telling me their life story.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me at the time that that was happening because I start in the middle of the conversation, right? Like,
Oh my gosh.
like I already had some clue, which like was obvious to me, right? Like the things
Right.
I said to you were almost so present for me, not for other people, that I couldn't, it was as if you had said it to me. That's my experience in that moment.
That's amazing.
So that could get weird when
Yeah.
you don't know somebody and you're
Yeah.
doing that,
And you're like-
and they're like, either they appreciate it or they're
Right.
angry at you.
Oh, okay. And what's that experience like?
Uncomfortable.
Yeah. So have
You
you
know?
had people get like?
I
Or more
really
defense.
do a lot of pacing, like internal checking, to make sure I'm not saying what they haven't told me.
Okay.
Sometimes I screw that up.
Okay.
And then I get weird responses like, I didn't say that to you. How did you know that?
Uh-huh.
And it'll either make people sort of like, oh, can you read my mind? Which I can't unless you're thinking very loudly.
Uh-huh.
And I just kind of cope with it.
Yeah.
I do my best to meet people from my heart, and usually it softens it.
Yeah.
And most of the people who are in my life who are close to me expect that.
Right.
Because I can't not. Like
Well,
if you're close to me,
right.
I can't not do it.
Right.
Right?
Right. What's that like raising kids?
There are no secrets.
Yeah.
They
pretty
just
awesome.
are not. They're just very hard to keep secrets. And me from them, and them from me.
Right.
So, I mean, my kids are young. They're 10 and 12. So far, it's.
But they've always known, and they've had this. I mean, obviously they've
it's-
grown up this way.
right.
So.
hasn't been. I mean, I think they don't know any other way.
Right. But I have to think that has to produce like the most authentic relationship, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it could be a little
there's-
scary because. But
I don't think there's been any scary, at least yet,
Okay.
because there hasn't been a need. There's definitely a big closeness,
Mm-hmm.
and I encourage them to be honest.
Yeah.
And partly because when you experience the world the way I do, if I feel something from someone or know something, and they lie about it, it makes me feel crazy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
Like if, for example, that feeling of it's okay for you to have fun,
Mm-hmm.
if your response to me was, what are you talking about? That's not my issue.
Right. So that would
Because-
be like a defensive-ness in me.
Right.
But then it like blocks your channel almost.
Okay, well, for me, it's like I see blue, and if
Uh-huh.
you say to me, what are you talking about? This is not blue. It's orange.
Yeah.
It's a little crazy maybe.
Yeah. Right.
That's kind of my experience.
Yeah. And you can come across people in your
Oh,
life that will do that to
absolutely.
you, and
I
then
have.
yeah.
I have, yeah.
And then
More personally than professionally.
Right. And that's what I'm thinking. Is like
Because when people come to my workspace, they want that from me. And it supports them, right? But
right.
if I'm with my brother and I see a dynamic and it challenges him, then he's not going to appreciate it,
Right.
right?
Right. But
And-
and then that defensiveness
Comes forward.
comes
yeah.
forward, and it leads you down that path of
Mhm.
that self-protection of his or whoever it is.
Both of us on some
Yeah,
level.
right.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, I haven't always known because like I said, I feel pretty like I attract these things. People tend to tell me their stories and feel comfortable with me, and but I haven't always known what to do with that, and I've definitely overstepped my boundaries and stepped on toes because if you don't have any boundaries yourself,
Right.
you also don't know how to,
Have them
like for other people almost,
Or to respect
their space,
Right.
right? Because we can all,
Well, I think it's harder for helpers,
yeah.
because you want to help. And so
Right.
that drive sometimes overrides someone else's privacy or boundary, even when you know it's there.
Yeah, and maybe that's why I'm so big on intention, because I always just want people to trust my intention, because my intention is always, I
always
feel
good.
like my intention is always good, but that doesn't mean that every step is right,
Yeah, and I think just because you see it and you know it doesn't give you a right to do something with it.
Yeah,
And it's really, really important to honor other people's choices, movements, timing.
yeah,
Sometimes in a friend, you can see they're headed towards something that's not going to feel so good, but you still have to let them
Their
go.
story.
Yeah, because there's a learning to be done there.
Mm-hmm.
And even in the experience of getting hurt, the sacred is present.
Right.
And it's been a really hard lesson for me, that one, because it hurts to see someone you love hurt.
I hate watching people hurt. It
Right.
hurts me, like, to sit back and not be able to do something about it. And that's only something I've recently learned.
Yeah,
to have
I
that.
think also if you can trust that sitting back and not doing something is also doing something. It's also helping, but it's a very different helping.
Yeah.
It's like trusting in their ability to grow and meet the challenge they've called to themselves.
Right. And I think at least, when I talk about like my marriage or things that have gone wrong or what I would have seen as wrong in my life, it was because I was so, for lack of a better word, hell-bent on this being the right thing and being attached to one outcome, where I would say now, like, my biggest points of growth have been because I've let go of the one outcome philosophy and said, there's a journey, there's a story, so just embrace it and see what you learn. Versus saying, like, I have to do everything that I could possibly do, whether it's healthy or not, to have this be the outcome. Well, that's why, my kids joke with me because my personal Instagram handle is Faith in the Journey, and they joke with me about, Mom, what's faith in the journey? I'm like, because this is what I learned. I have faith in my journey now, not in my outcome. Like, I've never arrived. And it's led me through down this path to not be afraid to try things like energy healing. Like I did yoga teacher training, and that's what led me to you. Because just one of the girls said, I sensed this, and I said, tell me about that. And
there you are.
Yeah. So, how about like boundaries that you have to keep in your life when you're taking this? How did you go about learning about that process of boundaries? Because when you're taking in this much, to me that seems like that's been one of the biggest things I've learned.
It's a good question. I think for me, learning about boundaries hasn't ended. So it's sort of like an unending process.
Sure.
And my process of learning kind of went from very energetic and is getting more and more and more and more practical.
Okay.
So sort of going from that spirit place down to the body more and more. So I think the first training that I did helped me a lot.
Okay.
In terms of energy boundaries and learning like the difference between what's coming in and what's coming from within me.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, what you're taking from the outside world.
Right.
Okay.
And what's fundamental to that is knowing who you are, right? Like, if I don't know the quality of my own grief and pain, I don't know the difference between my pain and someone else's.
Yeah.
So there are energetic techniques that I use to set boundaries, like pulling my aura in, kind of bringing in my feelers the way that I go out into the world and touch and sense, and keeping sort of my energetic hands to myself.
And maybe in different situations you're going to use those things differently.
Right.
Yeah. Depending on where you're walking in or where you're.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hold my form, my energetic form, in a variety of ways. And that takes training.
Yeah.
Like, I've spent years learning how to control how large my aura is, how close to my body it is, whether I'm holding someone inside that field or not. And if someone were to walk around, follow me around and watch me, you could see the different dynamics.
Really?
Totally. I
Because
really think so.
I when I'm nervous or not feeling comfortable, I do this. I will always like have my hands clasped, and I'll even hold them tight. And certain people do that to me, but I never knew that there was a connection until recently. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm learning about those types of things. Is that
Absolutely.
something that, like,
I mean, you have energy centers,
and
so you feel less, and they feel less of you.
Right.
So it's a little more contained, and that's a boundary.
Yeah.
Some people will do this. It's another way of containing.
And it's because I don't want to take in. Like, I don't want to take it. And it's usually because it feels either uncomfortable or painful, right? Because, and and then when you see joy,
And
you know,
want to
then
be open to
and
it.
then my, you know, my arms are moving, and yeah, that's really, really interesting. What kind of things do you see as far as like physical, have you seen physical ailments in the body? Like, can you feel ailments based on, you know, like pain? I have these ideas that, like, you know, like in yoga they say you hold, you know, women hold a lot of pain in their hips because of the, you know, that's like life pain is being stored in your, you know. Do you sense that? Like, are you able to separate?
I think for me, that comes across in my own body. Like, I think, can I share a little bit about the work we did yesterday?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Go, yeah, I know.
So,
I'm an open book.
I was holding your head, and I kind of felt this pressure in my face, and like the bones of one side of my eye kind of sunk back a little bit. And as I did some cranial work with you to kind of adjust, it took us into a space.
Yeah,
And
I remember.
so for me, that's how I perceive that. It's in my own body.
Yeah.
And I follow it and kind of work with it, and as it changes inside of me, I know it's changing inside of the other person. Like, there's a big piece around your jaw.
And yeah.
And kind of interestingly, the jaw reflexes the hips. So if there's something going on in the jaw, there's usually something going on in the hips.
See, that just fascinates me. Are there other, like, I guess I would say Western world or America, like, this is not something that's like it's mainstream, like we don't talk about this kind of stuff. But do you think we're headed in a direction where people
Absolutely.
are more?
I mean, it's all over.
Yeah.
Everyone, you're hearing about it on television now. I mean, when I started my practice, nobody knew what energy work was.
Yeah.
Like, it was the weirdest thing you could talk about.
Right?
People would ask me, what do you do? And I would be like, how do I explain to you what I do?
Yeah.
And now there's so much more common language around just even the concept of energy that it's way easier
For sure.
to share about it.
Yeah. So explain, when you were first, like, what was your training? How did you do
My
Reiki?
history.
Yeah, what's your...
I started with training in something called polarity therapy,
Okay.
which was created by an osteopath who moved to India and basically combined the work of osteopathy with the energetic system of Ayurveda and yoga.
Yeah.
So there's a lot about chakras, and like that bit I just shared with you comes from polarity.
Okay.
And it included some training in cranial sacral therapy.
Okay.
So in that art, there's a whole lot about chakras and elements like water, fire, air, and balancing them and having the flow of that energy be harmonious in the body. And that training took me about 2 years to do. I also trained in a shamanic tradition for about 15 years.
Okay.
And now I'm training in a different one.
Okay.
What else? I did Reiki. You know, I did Reiki 1 before I did anything else.
Okay.
And I think I was probably 19, and I had no idea what I was going to.
Really?
Like, a friend said, let's go, and I went, and really all I remember is laying there and feeling kind of blissed out and seeing these white silhouettes walking around the room.
Really?
My imagination.
And for people that don't know what Reiki is, can you explain just from a kind of a basic level?
It's
what you're
energy.
doing?
It's energy healing. You're basically channeling, bringing in energy and different qualities of it into the client's body.
Because there's nothing like what you do, at least with me, and it's like real deep touch. It's pretty much just laying your hands on.
Right.
And then when you lay your hands, you feel different things in different areas, right?
Yeah. So on one hand, I'm sort of listening or feeling what's going on there, and then on the other hand, I'm bringing in the quality of energy it's needing. So for example, if someone comes in and they're having trouble with boundaries and they have a lot of fear and like certain kind of insecurity that keeps them ill at ease, then a lot of what I'll do with them is first create some space so that they can feel. So I work with the joints because that has to do with space.
Okay.
And then I often do a protocol that increases the energy of the earth, of the first chakra,
Okay.
which is a lot about stability and
Absolutely.
safety and slowness. And, you know, that changes things for them.
Yeah.
And it looks like nothing. It looks like I'm doing nothing.
No, I know, but you can feel it, and I think
Yeah.
maybe I wonder if, you know, I feel it, but I know I'm in tune to that
Yeah.
feeling, and I'm looking, I'm actively.
I can remember maybe 1 or 2 times when somebody has felt nothing.
Okay.
And even that is something.
Right.
It's meaningful.
Right. Well, and a little bit of what you wrote for me, and I will post that on my website, but I was really interested when you said that people who, and let me see if I get this right, that they're very spiritual, but then their physical life is not.
It's a mess.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you know, people will come to me for advice, or like, and even in my worst, like hardest days, or when I'm the most scared,
Mm-hmm.
I can see things clearly for other people before I could see them clearly for myself. And I don't know if that has to do with trusting yourself or having that confidence in yourself, but I thought that was a really interesting point, to be able to feel that spiritually. And how did you come to that realization?
Conclusion?
Yeah, is that just a lot of
Observation.
clients, a lot
I
of
think,
clients
yeah.
that.
I mean, it's observation, and it's also just sort of how the alchemy of the elements works. If you're a whole lot of air or ether,
Mm-hmm.
you tend to not like being grounded.
Uh-huh.
So you're missing the earth element.
Yeah.
Right? So, and people who have trauma, they've been hurt here in physical form. So they get a lot of experience checking out.
Yeah.
And they're good at it. They like it.
So
usually.
stuff like sensory deprivation, like I love to be underwater, like to go swim and like have to be away from
Mm-hmm. Is that
input. Like,
well, yeah, but that's not necessarily leaving your physical reality. That can actually take you more into your body.
Really?
Right? Because
Yeah.
you're feeling a lot of sensation.
yeah, I guess so. I've always thought of it because it's
It's
quiet
dreamy.
and I'm weightless, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's also that place of like it's all one,
yeah.
right? So I haven't done sensory deprivation
Okay.
tapes, so it's hard for me to speak directly to it. But I imagine you're feeling nourished
Yeah.
on all those levels.
Yeah.
Like there's some emotional nurturing and
Mhm.
freedom. Your body feels held, and
Right.
there's sort of comfort in that and in the
It's like
containment.
honestly one of the only places I can relax.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's it struck me the way that you wrote that when you said that spiritual realm is it's a cool place to hang out. You know, it's
Right,
But
but you need it well grounded,
Yeah.
or it doesn't serve your life.
exactly
Right,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
losing it.
Yeah, but
I don't
somehow
know.
we don't show it.
And
Or-
we're probably holding them, like they feel comforted and safe with us, because we're not going to hurt them. No matter how
Right.
overwhelmed you are, you're not going to be violent.
No,
Right?
right.
So that's felt.
Yeah, but I do think that like you get to a point in life where you have to figure out that disconnect. If other people are seeing something in you,
Mm-hmm.
like I've always, I felt like I loved myself. I didn't realize that I was having such a hard time being seen, or like the things that I'm addressing now,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that those things were part of
Right.
my story, But one of the first things that kind of started leading me there was like, I see like what other people see in me, but I don't feel it. And to try to make that connection and go, it feels good what they see in me.
Mm-hmm.
Like what they see is somehow it's helping me, but I have to get myself to a point where I actually believe in what they see, because I know my intention's good, but how do I make that jump of being able to use it for good? Like I had to
think
believe in myself.
Some of it is the critic inside of you.
Yeah,
You know?
she can be
It's-
pretty loud sometimes.
Yeah, it's sort of no matter what you do, it's not enough. It's still not good.
Yeah.
And that's different than self-love and self-appreciation.
Okay,
It's
explain
sort
that.
of a different voice.
Explain that.
piece. I'm not sure how to.
Okay.
I'll try. It's an aspect, it's part of you. And that part has a very loud voice. It's more connected to shame than it is to love. And this idea that you should always, always, always be striving towards being a good girl or a good person. And for some reason it's framed in such a way you can never get there.
Yeah.
And no matter how much you love yourself or appreciate yourself, if that's your concept of good, innately in it is you're never gonna get there.
Yeah. And it makes it hard to ever sit in the moment and just let
appreciate
down,
it.
Right?
Yeah, but the more you do that, the less that voice has power. The more you can accept that the imperfection is part of goodness.
Yeah.
The less striving you have to do.
You see this in my writing. I come to a lot of these conclusions when I write, and that's why even when I kind of came up with this, the original concept of the Optimist Journal was tell me your stories.
Right.
Tell me your most broken stories, because honestly, when my life broke wide open and the worst thing I thought of could happen was happening, I found the most love from people.
And that's that place of allowing the imperfection
when
to
I
be.
thought it was going to be, how could you, shame on you, that's what I felt, and then all of a sudden I was met with something so different that that was the beginning
Shocking.
of the healing, you know?
Yeah.
And
it's always that way.
yeah.
Isn't that wild? We get so
breaks my
convinced
heart.
that we have to be good, and when we let that go, and we just you're so spent you can't put it on anymore.
Yeah.
You discover you're loved the way you are.
Yeah. It's that whole concept of I'm enough.
Mm-hmm. And it's really I'm enough for myself.
Yeah.
And when you arrive there, then you can allow yourself to be aware of how you are enough for others. But when you never arrive at I'm enough for myself, you can't take in that perspective from someone else who sees you and says you're beautiful.
Yeah.
You're fine the way you are.
Yeah.
And
you don't feel it.
You don't.
Yeah.
Because you don't believe it about yourself.
Right. Which sets up, flawed relationships and pain
Right.
and all these different things that present themselves in society and make the world,
Crazy.
a hard place to live.
Yeah. Which is why in this blog I just put out, I say that your relationship to yourself is foundational. It sets the tone of all of your relationships. Because that's just the truth. It's how you treat yourself is what tells everyone around you how to treat you.
Yeah.
And there's really no way around that. And I think the hardest part of it is our willingness to be with the parts of ourselves that either scare us or we don't like or don't feel good to us.
Yeah.
But when we can kind of embrace them,
Mm-hmm.
allow them to be, and kind of treat it like that's my inner family and how do we find a way to get along,
Mm-hmm.
magic happens.
Yeah. I want to kind of deviate a little bit
Okay.
and see if this might be challenging. I don't know if you've ever worked with younger people, but I wonder if there's a way or a message that we could give to younger people. To me, it seems like real young kids can be really accepting of, feelings and then as you move towards those really vulnerable teenage years, we kind of close off and we look for those safety and the black and white and the this is right, this is wrong, and this fits in a box. And I'm a huge rule. I grew up. I'm a rule follower, and I defined myself on that. This is good. This is bad. And like you said, there are norms that help
Right.
societies run together, and I'm all in favor of that. But is there something you could speak to a younger person so they can learn this stuff? I like to call myself a late bloomer. Do we need this life experience to be able to get to this level, or can we
I've
teach
had
people?
lots of clients who are in 18, 20,
Really?
22.
Okay.
I do now. And I think the first thing I would say is be willing to learn.
Yeah.
Be willing to learn. Trust in your own goodness. and care for yourself.
Yeah.
Like, ultimately, the more we can cultivate being present in our hearts, the more beautiful our lives will be, regardless of what we've experienced or haven't experienced, what gifts we have or we don't have.
Right. Because every life's different. Right?
Absolutely.
So everybody's
And,
going to have a different experience. Like,
and it needs to be.
Right.
That's the beauty of existence, is all the uniqueness.
And it's so often we're like striving for something that somebody else has, right? Or we want to be.
And they don't necessarily
they
even
don't,
like what they have.
Right. So until you get really content with, and that's why one of my favorite things is like learn to love the mundane.
Yeah,
right?
and I don't think, you don't even have to be content, but you need to accept.
Okay.
Like, if you don't
like
like it, you have to accept it to change it.
Right.
If you do like it, you have to accept it to have it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right?
That's a really good point.
And
different people struggle with different things, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So some of us need to push the limits on like, I don't want to say breaking the rules, but getting outside that box, because we're such conventional thinkers, and some people push the limits so hard you're like, whoa, like hopefully, like finding that true self is different for everybody, right?
I mean, each true self is unique.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's interesting for me because I don't live in a box. I like, sometimes
I'm trying really hard.
Sometimes I wish I did.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I walk around and I'm like, yeah, you know how to be, and you know what people expect from you, and you know what the rules are.
Right.
Like you walk into the room and you know what the rules are, or even like you like somebody, you have a crush on them, and you know what the rules are.
Right. Right.
For me, I'm like in the deep end before I've had the conversation. That's really uncomfortable for me and the other person. Like, hello, and I don't know why I started saying that, but
I just felt it.
Yeah,
and I had to. Yeah.
So whatever you're in, if you like it, accept it and enjoy it. If you don't, accept it and learn and grow and change.
Right.
And no life is perfect. It's not meant to be.
Yeah.
And I think another thing I'd say to a young person is, it's going to be hard and it's going to be easy. It's going to be graceful and it's going to be a pain. This is life.
Yeah.
The goal isn't to always be in the joy.
Right?
It's not. It's to have
because the experience is in that give and take, or the ebb and flow, right?
It's just the nature of existence. Yeah.
So if you say like, even if you're trying to set yourself up to have always happy days.
Bad idea.
Bad idea, right?
Bad idea. It's a very unrealistic goal.
Yeah.
Like we should.
And do we have to turn a part of ourselves off? Like you have to shut something down.
Absolutely.
To not be able to feel, the flip side of happiness.
How could you not? Like if you walk down the street and you see a hurt animal, or you turn on the news and you see some depressing thing on the news. Like we need to have the whole range of feeling. Right. But where we are in our hearts is what determines what we do with it. Right. And for me, that space is different than emotion.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like the heart is just loving acceptance.
Right.
And it's not always mushy, gentle, like soft love. Sometimes it's the kind of love that a parent has when they say absolutely not to their child.
Yeah.
There's edges.
Right.
Sharpnesses to love as well. But when our hearts are awake, we cannot help but go for the greater good. We cannot help but go for our own greater good, our communities, and the world at large. And a lot of the things that happen that create harm is happening because there's a disconnect from the heart.
Absolutely.
And
often it's because our heart was hurt. And we didn't really know what to do with it at that point.
Right. And so then we left the heart and never went back. Which is it's too painful.
Yeah.
So for me, like that's the goal, is the resiliency it takes to go back into your heart after you've been hurt. And the strength that cultivates when you do it. Yeah. That's living.
That is so true.
And because without that you can't risk. Right. You can't risk living.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking.
It sucks.
And the world becomes,
tiny.
so tiny
and tight.
Yeah, and rigid and controlled, and then you reach. Oh,
and the bad news is you cannot control
do
life.
it, right? You can't.
It's not possible. It's like trying to control the weather.
Right.
Good luck.
Yeah.
It will make you
Let
pop.
go. Yeah. The second when I let go, you know, it takes away the fear of so many things, and every once in a while it creeps back in, but I'm learning how to like push it back and go, no, I want this bigger life.
Yeah, and it's okay. It's okay to be afraid, you know? Like fear is also a valuable experience. It's a good informant.
Yeah.
We don't want to tune it out. We want to be able to discern the difference between it's got something good to say to me, like there's some value, or I'm like just in this pattern and I'm blind. Right. Like I'm so afraid I'm just going blind.
So Elizabeth Gilbert wrote Big Magic. I don't know if you've read that book. No. It's on creativity. Cool. But she talks about fear and letting fear have a seat in your car, but not the driver's seat.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So is there...
I'm saying the same thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it protects you, but sometimes it's unreasonable.
Right.
And
sure.
And unfounded. And it's not, like the goal isn't let's get rid of fear completely. It's let's be able to know the difference between what is it saying, where is it coming from.
Which comes back around to the nervous system and the fight or flight, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it could, again, that, you know, that comes full circle with how we live our lives, and then that very basic state that we're born with, you know, born into, and how we learn how to, you know, not control it, I guess. I don't want to say control it, but learn how to live within that nervous system and that parasympathetic. And
yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, when they start to come into the parasympathetic state, it's almost boring, like as a life state, because it's a lot less dramatic. You have you know, you're signing off on the constant adrenaline rush and the constant pitch of euphoria, and then the crash. You're going into the space of like things are simple, there's only one or two big deals every once in a while. But what happens when you arrive there is you are in the flow. You're in the space of being.
State of flow, which because it's you know, you felt it on occasion, and then the more and more that you sink into, you feel like when you sink into that place where you're really supposed to be, like when you're in your, I feel like I'm living my destiny, that's when I feel like that. Oh, it's just
right.
It's
you're
just,
right where you're supposed to be at the right
where
time.
I used to get, you know, nervous about this or nervous about that. I didn't 6 months ago. I wouldn't have been in front of a camera, and now I'm not even nervous.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean? And it's not for any like hard work that I've done, but it has. You know, but what I've done, it doesn't feel like hard work.
Right. Usually, the work that's working doesn't feel very hard.
Right.
It's funny.
Yeah, that's, oh my gosh, that's so true. And then the work that's not working,
sometimes it does.
The work that's not working, like, makes you feel like,
and
well, it's unsustainable. It takes your energy versus.
It's not the right work.
Yeah.
It's not going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And I was going to just say something about the nervous system. That, like when you're in the parasympathetic state, it's just everything is easier.
It is.
And that's the other part of there's not as much drama because things are easier.
Right.
For me, it's like I really feel connected to life in that state. And the good news about the force of life is that in its own intention, it wants everyone to be in the good. It wants harmony. Nature wants harmony. So when we let go of controlling the force of life and sink it into it carrying us, it can only take us towards our good. And there is so much support there.
Right, and that gets you away from that idea where I had, you know, you have these ideas like it has to be a certain way.
Right.
No, we can be seeking good.
Absolutely.
And see what
And that's
comes.
the power of intention.
Right.
Like when you hold an intention and then you relax into nature holding you or life, suddenly someone walks up to you in a supermarket and hands you a card.
So that's my life.
Whatever
right now,
it is. It's because you've let go of being the one to make it happen.
Yeah.
And there's an openness and there's a relaxedness.
Yeah.
There's a absence of aggression. Not always. Sometimes aggression is necessary. But in those moments, there isn't the need to push.
Right. And that's what I like about some of the things you've said to me, is that there's not one, that you don't shy away from any emotions.
No.
You know, there's a place for anger, there's a place for sadness, there's a place for, you know, joy.
And they all have value.
Right?
They absolutely all have value. I think anger is one of the most underrated emotions and one of the most important. Because for me, true anger emerges out of a sense of dignity.
Interesting.
Right? And when your dignity is violated, when your boundaries are crossed and you get angry, it's because something is not honoring your just innate basic sense of dignity, of value as a human being. And there is nothing like anger, or as good as an informant as anger is in those moments.
Right.
And if we would allow ourselves the anger and the information it has, the impulse to say no, the world would be such a better place.
Right.
The impulse to speak, like, no, you don't get to call me at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Or no, you don't get to kill my plants because you don't like them. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And when there is trauma and abuse, that's what gets disengaged.
Right.
Is that force. It's that anger or impulse to honor your dignity, to protect it.
And then that every time that you make that choice not to honor your dignity, it's like
a bit more is taken away.
Right?
Yeah. You feel less and less entitled to dignity.
Yeah.
Which is horrible.
It is, because every human being is worthy of that.
And one thing I would say to parents is don't do that to your children. Support their sense of dignity. It's
and what are like
not an easy way.
Practical ways that you could say you would look to do
one
that.
of the things I do, which really makes things harder for me in a lot of ways, is that I let them question me. I let them challenge me. And I do that without losing my authority.
Okay, I'll speak to that. That's
right? Like, I don't give in to them.
Okay.
But I let them ask me why. And I let them push back and get angry. You know, there are times where I've set boundaries and my 10-year-old has had an enormous tantrum. And that's fine. The anger is okay.
Right.
The rule is the rule.
The rule is the rule.
And at the same time, it's important not to indulge it, not to make it a thing.
Right.
But sort of like, okay, you're washing your hands. All right, you're angry at me for saying no. Now we're going to go do the dishes.
Right.
I see that you're angry.
Yeah.
You get to express
You acknowledge it. I used to say acknowledge it, and then I step over it. When it was a tantruming child, don't hurt yourself. I'm going to step over you now.
And also, I'm willing to own it if I've made the mistake.
Yeah. Which is huge. Because that's a learn by example, or lead by example type of thing to me.
It is, but it's also a space where I'm honoring their sense of reality, right? And my power over them is not my goal. My power with them is my goal.
Yeah, which
they're
builds
trusting
a beautiful
me is my
relationship.
Goal.
Absolutely.
And sometimes that works, and sometimes it's hard.
Yeah, I know.
Like hard.
It's really hard. And as they get older,
it's harder.
It's even harder. I always say what you do the first 5 years like sets you up.
But I hope that because my kids aren't teenagers yet, so I don't know. But as I relate to them in this way, it builds trust, and that trust will take care of those challenging moments.
I see that. I definitely see that. You have to, and I'm not even speaking to my own kids, but I see it in families. Like I've always said, let them know the why behind your no or your yes, but why do we do things? And when they're little, you can say no and not have, the funnel is smaller, and you can say no instead and go on to the next thing. But the older they get, to me, it seems like the why behind it, they're reasoning creatures. They're you want to teach them how to think.
Absolutely.
Not just follow the rules.
Well, I mean, I want them to think. I want them to be able to challenge authority. I want them to have an internal sense of right or wrong. If I'm overriding all of those things, they will never have them within themselves.
Right.
And the same is true for me when I work with my clients. I don't want to be the one telling them what's wrong with them, how to fix themselves.
Right.
It's a collaboration.
Sure.
And really they're telling me where
Right.
to go and what's needed.
Yeah, you're just opening door. You're open. That door is open, so
Right.
you can. It's almost like a mirror, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm tracking.
Right.
I'm tracking what's happening in the body, what's happening in the nervous system, what emotions are in the room, what strange images am I getting.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, that's a lot to take in a life. Do you?
It is.
Yeah. How's your energy? Like, what type of? Do you feel tired a lot? Do you feel energized? I mean, how does it affect you?
I'm everywhere. Like I'm just
like
like
anybody
it's the
else.
same as
Yeah.
anybody else probably.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of challenges in my life. Life has not been easy.
Okay.
There's been trauma and divorce and difficult relationships with exes, with parents. Parents is a lot better now. And all of that has been sort of the fuel of my work and growth. And I'm hugely dedicated to my own healing and growth.
See, that's
I don't
always inspires me.
I don't think that you can do the kind of work I do with people without really constantly investing in your own growth.
I almost think that's why I'm attracted to the energy healing thing, because going back to the Western, like when you're someone growing up in America that you tend to take in other people's problems, say, or they always tell you their story. People will say, oh, you should be a therapist. And I feel like, and I don't know this because I'm pretty just a creative and I'm a writer and I'm interested in people's stories, but it seems to me like we stop, the Western world, we therapize, but there's some wall that I don't feel with energy healing. Like I feel like we keep pushing.
Well, I think like the way that I hold energy healing is that the process we're in is a process of growth. It's not a process of fixing something broken.
Right. Oh, okay.
And whatever reason the person is there, whatever reason they're coming for, it's their beginning
their
growth
story.
point.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's abuse, whether it's a hurt back, whether it's I'm trying to get a new job, whatever it is that they present, it's like the syllabus for the growth. It's not, I don't look at people and go, oh, you're broken in this way, you have this dysfunction, you have this disorder.
Yeah. See, and that.
And partly because I'm not a therapist, so I don't have that concept of people.
Right.
And and although I do know a good bit about the therapeutic stuff,
that's not me bad mouthing therapy. It's just something I've felt in my own.
I think it also has to do with the therapist.
Yes, and I've had wonderful ones, and
Yeah.
I'm very pro people
Going.
letting it out. Like
Yeah.
I think anything we do to let our story out, as long as it's in a safe place, is a very good thing. I think for me, holding things inside, and from what I've seen of others, holding things inside is what leads us down those paths to, there's just so many.
And you can't, that makes it hard to grow.
Yeah.
I'm smiling because I'm thinking like I should say this thing of that one of the challenges for me of living in this state is this question all the time of like what's real and what's crazy.
Okay. That must
No.
be kind of a difficult question to sit with.
It's just trippy.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to hear you talk about your experience with me because I don't have your perspective, right? I'm
Right.
in my experience
Right.
from my own
Yeah.
perspective. So the extent to which my experience is the same as yours in the context of a session is
Right.
really beautiful.
Well,
That's
I will
cool.
say, and I don't know, this might be a really good way to wrap this up, but I've never sat, the things that you spoke to in 2 sessions, you hit on exactly where my greatest fears lie. I mean, in my new professional endeavor, in life in general, I have a hard time walking into a room. If people look at me, I've always felt this, please look at somebody else. Please, why? I don't know. but you hit on these things, and those things hold you back.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not ashamed of myself. Like but maybe that's new. You know what I mean? Like, this is a huge process of growth for me to be able to be willing to put my words out there. And I did it, you know, small at first, and now we'll see where it goes, but I'm not afraid of it. And part of that's been just 2 sessions with you, which is why I'm so fascinated. Like, I love the work that you do, because I honestly feel so much freer.
That just means so much to me. I mean, that's
and
my paycheck.
I want this work. I love that. And I am so passionate. I love seeing people do what they're like. When you've come across people that are doing, like, they're living their passion. You know, there's nothing. That's the greatest life you can have. It's not, and I keep saying, it's not about being famous. There are so many awesome people out there just doing
awesome
their
things.
life.
Yeah.
And we don't pay a lot of attention to it.
It takes dedication.
Yeah.
You know? That's the thing. It takes tenacity.
Yeah.
Because it's not always fun.
No.
And it's not
And you're
always
the
easy.
believer, right? You have to wake up being the believer, because there's going to be so many other people that are either going to say, you don't have it, you're crazy, you don't, you know,
totally.
I don't believe in what you do, whatever it is.
Yeah. That's all
if
happens.
you don't believe it, right? It's happened to me too. And if you don't believe it, like, why do you get up?
I think you have to want it enough that it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
You just have to do it.
And
right?
this is where all
like
these,
for me, one of the gains of doing my work is it's a space in which I can genuinely be myself with whoever walks in. And there aren't many contexts that I get to do that within.
Right.
Right? Like, if I had the kind of conversations I had with you in my office at a party, it would be really weird.
But see, that's what I say. And I wrote that in one of my blogs. I said, I'm terrible with small talk. I'm uncomfortable.
Right.
As long as you keep me on that level, I'm stiff and uncomfortable. You dig deep, like, I dive in and go deep, and I can sit and talk all night. But that's very unnerving to some people. And I'm also the last person that wants to make anybody feel uncomfortable.
Right.
So you found that place where you
have a room.
Right, where they're coming in willingly. So when they come in, you have that safe place to be yourself, which is like the most amazing thing.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
I'll be back. I don't know. I love talking to you.
That was fun.
Yeah, and I would.
I wasn't sure whether you put it back on.
I know, I wasn't either.
Oh no, it's good. We're good.
Okay.
Yeah, I was recording that whole thing.
Okay.
It was great. I just wanted to get a different angle because well, it felt kind of stagnant.
Yeah, that was on.
Some of them I did, and some of them were taken off the internet. Just like asking.
We sat here the
questions.
first time we did it. We talked for 3 hours.
Nice.
3 hours. Think of editing that. That was fun.
So, yeah, these lights get super hot.
Yeah,
too,
they
so
do. It's warm.
But yeah, this was fun.
Fascinating, right?
You're amazing.
Oh, thank you.
You're really awesome.
That's nice to hear.
Abe's been working for me since August. I think like right after, I think I came to you maybe 3 weeks later.
Huh.
And
Well, see, and going back a little bit to your point of hitting flow, because I came from my last job that I was in. I wasn't very happy towards the end. Well, obviously, it's normally how it goes, but I ended up struggling for the past 6 months to hit status flow daily and being like as productive as I could be. So potential value wasn't there as high as I would want it to be. And working with Wendy and figuring out everything that we're figuring out and going through the process and everything that we're doing, I just I have not been as productive as I have been like this
As
much.
you're being.
Oh yeah, because the productivity line right now is just.
That's great.
You're killing it. You're killing it. Let me turn these off. It's
hot. I know.